This weekend we're gonna go. All of us are gonna go celebrate. Okay. We'll go out to eat or something. All right. All right. Oh, missed that dip. That would have been nice. Maybe it's not over yet. This is odd. Was it like on the hourly or something? It was on the hourly. Hmm. Good morning. I don't know about that. It's already divergent. I think I'll just let it go for now. All right, so a little bit of red here and there this morning. Obviously, GameStop way lower than it was yesterday. But, you know, c'est la vie. Apple's down, finally made its drop. That's actually kind of good. I was getting really tired of this nonsense. It does have an appearance to me of a bit of a head and shoulder. So I'm thinking that it's going to go down pretty low before anything else happens. There's just no good news. It was struggling to keep itself afloat there. So kind of got stuck. Yeah, it's not severe drop. It's like down to 196. Like that's the first stop anyways. So not a huge deal. And we'll get to GME. I mean, it's bounced up about 2% since it opened. Not really what I want to see, obviously, with the dilution announcement. And, well, I say dilution, but it was an offering. It was like the last one. So there's kind of an immediate offering, and then there's like an option to buy some more. And they're notes, so you can look it up if you want. We did it last time. We read through it. Convertible notes. So last time it was like a 0% convertible note. So there really wasn't much benefit to holding, meaning like they couldn't gain interest or something on it. I don't remember what it was exactly. I'd have to go back and look again. But the note could be essentially paid back. It'd have to be paid back by GameStop if they wanted it to be. They could just say, hey, we just want you to pay it back. So it's like a debt thing, right? And GameStop would owe that back, essentially that cash back that they're getting from the note. The alternative is that they don't have to do that. It's obviously shares, so they can, if it benefits the person who had the offering, right? It was a private offering, and the price goes up, then there wouldn't be any reason to like ask for the money back. So it's a pretty good deal for whoever got the offering. And as long as GameStop doesn't just capitulate completely, they have a lot of time to pay it off. They would have a lot of time, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be paid off. So we talked about last time how, like, depending on how you played with that money or used it, you could even do like a share buyback in the future if it were worthy enough. You'd have plenty of cash to do it, and you'd be better off. We did a lot of stuff on that last time. I don't want to go into it again. It's basically the same thing. And there's probably more nuance to it. I'm not going to be the guy that covers it this time. So the market on the whole did drop yesterday. So like at the end of the day, everything kind of sank a little bit. There was some stuff that held up okay, but like almost everything was coming to this head. I mentioned it yesterday because there was it seemed like there was a chance you get a little bit of a pop and then a drop. So Wednesday was supposed to be like that pop for a lot of the stuff. It did, like I told you guys about that Starbucks play, finally went above 95 and had like 200% on it. I sold half my position the day before for 30%. But it is what it is. I didn't wait for my own TA to finish. This particular setup looked like it was going to try to go up and then maybe back down. And it did. I mean, if you look at the RSI, it did push up above perhaps that wedge formation and then drop back down. And at this point, it may end up looking more like a flag, than a wedge. And that's okay. I don't really care either way because in the end, the price action itself is a bit of a wedge action here. And it did push over the top, failed to advance at least immediately, came back down. This would need to kind of hold and then break if it's going to go back up. I had speculated probably around 608. It only ever got to like 605. A near miss is still a miss. So it is a miss, but we'll see. You never know. The market could still have something happen here. I don't want to blame anything. The blame shifting game is kind of pointless in the market, but I think that the market bulls were really counting on not just the CPI, which was fine. It was moderately better than expected. It wasn't like a humongous percentage-wise. It was a big, it was like 100% different, but because it was 0.2 or 0.1 versus 0.2. But, on the whole, it wasn't exactly bad. It was just kind of okay. And so it was good, is what I'm trying to say. And that's fine. But the China talks did not really end as people expected. It was a very cool reception to that news. There really wasn't a whole lot about it that, to me anyways, there wasn't really much to be excited about. They had the rare earth deals, and that was it. And you have some tickers like the microchips, like those guys would be pretty heavily affected by that deal. The ability to trade with China is a big deal for like Nvidia. Apple stands to gain probably the most of all of them. I don't know why it would affect Tesla very much, the China deal. I mean, they're not exactly number one there anyways. But sure, And there's, obviously we can go on and on and on. But for now, I think that peak or no peak, even if you got another push here, I'm not convinced it would be very long-winded. So we'll see what happens. Easy enough to say that, right? Just say we'll see. So let's talk about GameStop. This is the big elephant in the room, and AMC, because both of them had their breakdowns. And we had mentioned that there were some probable targets for AMC. Some are more obvious than others. This is clearly like a breakdown of what I would call like a bit of a head and shoulders structure here on the rise. Not my favorite kind of breakdown because it looks like a cat ear breakdown, and those typically end pretty sour. So there is still a chance, and I don't like to dangle a carrot of hopium. I really don't, but the idea of it being like a shallow S-curve isn't impossible. But I think with that announcement yesterday for GameStop, it makes it very difficult to see that as the case, because it's lost, and there's some problems here. I'll just address them in a minute, but it lost obviously any kind of momentum it may have had. So that consolidation here, I think, is news-based. There's a little bit of confusion in there. Parts of it are kind of distributive, and we talked about that. The whole is not great looking. There was nothing very disguised about that. It refused to make higher highs as it went. So my idea wasn't so much that it was bullish it was really more of a contrarian play for me. I was saying that, you know, there's evidence here that you may want to go back up and redistribute, and it is still distributive. There was evidence here that you may want to go back up and redistribute. So this could end up becoming what I call a shallow S-curve, where it builds out like it's going to go down a full 50-50 from a middle point and drop. But it doesn't actually go all the way. Instead, it rebounds, and it has to make certain things happen first. At this point, it really wouldn't take that much. And that's why I said it's a really kind of a hot seat play, because there's you're kind of a stone throw away from a pretty major reversal. And when that happens, if it happens, then you get some pretty nice movement to the upside. So the low end targets there were like 389 kind of targets, and then the higher end targets were all the way up to, and this is like a redux chart, like I redid it just to kind of see the shoulder structure better. But the redo targets were basically, the higher targets were basically like 460, which is very high. That would be like a final hurrah, though, if it did that. So where are we going in the meantime if we go down? Again, I don't find this to be overly complex. There's a lot of potential places to stop on a retracement. This doesn't mean, again, that it bounces and goes to the moon. I think that's a bit misleading. I think that wouldn't be the truth. But we certainly have evidence that there's a potential spot around 298, perhaps up to about 308, and that's about a 10-cent range right there. I think that area would be a potentially good place to stop. $3 by itself, you might just say $3. That's obviously a place, but and that does come back to some support levels clearly, but it's closer to like 298 in my opinion, based on like some measurements. So when we look back at this, I don't see this as like dropping off the face of the earth just yet. There's another piece to this kind of puzzle, I suppose, which may have already happened here. I'm not positive, which is usually that redistribution. So typically once you make this, if this is a breakdown, and it certainly looks like it's tried to break down, and it successfully did it here, typically there's a reversal just to go back up and check anyways. So normally what I would be looking at, and I've already got it on the chart here, I'd probably be looking at this blue line coming up as the likelihood of a reversal area. Because it kept fanning outward and downward, I'm not so sure that that's going to be met. I think there's another one right here. And so again, these two pockets, one's at 380, one's at like 362. We talked about that one quite a bit. Those are potential places to just have like we'll call it a UTAD, which is an up thrust after distribution. So like it's selling off, comes back up. I often just say it's a hook. So when we look at those kind of positions, I don't think it's impossible that this gets kind of a rebound move where maybe it comes down as low as about 3, and then you kind of rebound back up and hit the top here. It actually makes sense on this as a widening, because you can see it's widening outward to slightly dip below and then come back above. Now again, you might say, well, couldn't that be very bullish to have that kind of reversal if it's like a spring on this widening and it's some kind of a, yeah, I mean, it could be. But even if that were to happen, I would still take a measurement from like, let's say 298 through like the middle, and you're going to still likely end up in the same spot. And then the only other one I could probably do is off this top. And that's like 420, which is kind of weird. That's a weird number. I wouldn't think that would be where we'd stop, but point is that there's a lot of resistance. Okay. So do we have cause to be bullish? Well, when you get to the nitty gritty of it, some of it will depend on how GME responds to the news. But a lot of this is going to also be, I think, based on balance volume for AMC. So for those that are just kind of interested in AMC, maybe you're not as interested in GME, just keep that in mind. Like this was one of those models that we had. I don't think this is necessarily gone. And I know it sounds weird, but remember that if you have a trend and then it breaks down, I'm going to recreate this over here, but make it like pretty simple. So let's say you have a trend that breaks down. let's say it's like 3 times, and then it goes up and it comes down through. It creates a weakness, which this did right here, and then it reacts opposite. So from this point, this already looks like it's broken down. So you're going to have like a couple different things that are possible. One would be, again, some kind of a final, maybe up thrust moment or something like that, which is just like a hook. And then you're going to do the 50-50 down, right? You're going to start this transition down. At that point, you may be facing like other kinds of breakdowns. So you'd have to kind of see what happens. The other option here is usually like a little bit more simple, which is the potential just to kind of run up and hook here. That's where we see sort of that really spiky, I think Stockfather called it like devil horns or something like that at one point, where you have this kind of really exaggerated secondary up thrust that's a UTAD, but it's like really pointed. That's sort of what I had imagined here if that were to fail. The one that might be a little bit hard to see is this guy. And what that is a bit different. Every now and then, when you create like an SOW like this, you get I'll call like an M cross underneath the trend. So those two are there. I'm going to get rid of them so you can see the next one. So what this is that you basically have like, this is like a wave cross, right? And this hits like some level and it shows support. And then instead of going down or hooking here and stopping, and in order to hook, you would have a rise here that hooks, right? That was like the hook example that I was just talking about. That would be this guy where it like comes up and then drops. Okay. In order to kind of rebound here, you'd have this rebound moment like this. Now it's a little odd. So I'm going to delete these two so you can see better. But in this case, you could have what I would call like a, it's not really like a spring, but it's like a liquidity test beneath that trend, which is likened to a spring, but it's essentially like an M cross on a rise. So you have like a 1-2, then you'd actually have like a 3-4 on the other side. Every now and then, that's your distribution model right there where it comes up and it fails. Every now and then, and it is kind of rare, you do get what I call like the shallow S-curve, which is it had made this motion like it was going to do a full S-curve, right? And then it fails. Now you might be saying, well, you already said that and it didn't happen. I know, but it also built out larger. And the question is like, well, how long do you hold on to that? You can't just keep saying it's going to do that. No, you can't. And like I've said before, especially for GME, like breakdowns are breakdowns, If it drops certain levels, it drops certain levels. Like this broke back through the creek. This came back down underneath 26, 28. Sorry, not sorry kind of thing. Like it's a breakdown. Now it has to get back over 26, 33 or it's just stuck, right, in a distribution for now. You could say whatever you want to say about a rebound. You can say that it's definitely going to happen or it's not going to happen. I don't really care. I'm just saying that the numbers themselves, from a technical standpoint, that's a breakdown, okay? That's what that is. I mentioned that yesterday. It went way too low, and then it broke down, unfortunately. It didn't even hold at 26, so that's all there is to it. We were watching that, and I was concerned about it before the announcement, but, I didn't see that coming, so in that particular way. So anyways, when you look at something like this, right, again, it may be like easy to say, well, that's not going to happen. It's already too far gone or this or that. And if GME is in a breakdown, why would AMC run? Well, remember that while GME is technically broken down, and it is, and I think even doubly so, it's dropped beneath this ice level again. It is possible. Maybe it's not the most reasonable thing, but it is possible that it could come back up and still have a pretty decent run up, maybe even back to 30, just to see if we can get back above that marker there where that gap is, right around 30.61. Remember, it never filled that gap, so it left a ledge there. And that kind of stuff does matter. It may not matter immediately, in the short term, but it will matter at some point. And that level that was marked is important. So 30.50 is an important level. That's still a big run. Yeah, it's not where you wanted to start the run by any means, but that's a 35% move, you know? And in that regard, it's like, well, the equivalency of that move for AMC is quite far. 35% gets you back over the top here at $4 again. It's an adequate. It's like I was saying, like it's kind of like this guy where you have this really high extended cat ear. Excuse me. So these are one of those. This is one of those situations where like it's not where you want to go, it's not where you want to start, but it's not impossible. There's never like a 0% chance of anything in the market. That's kind of silly to say that. It's also not necessarily like a more than 50% chance right now, right? We have to see a lot of things happen, but I still like to think about the things that could happen, even if they're not the most likely things. So in this particular case, I know what to expect in terms of like a rebound, what's most typical. And what's most typical, again, are these 2 or 3 scenarios. They're not particularly difficult to identify. Well, notice that the on balance is actually divergent right now on the 4-hour. That should not be ignored. I think that's a pretty important signal. So like right now on AMC, this price action definitely came lower. That on balance volume is not dropped beneath this low yet. That doesn't mean it couldn't. The day is still young. You know, we just started 30 minutes in. But as of right now, it's testing that 4-hour. It just dipped beneath that 4-hour moving average. That on balance is still elevated. It still looks like a potential right here for a shallow S-curve, which typically would come below. But that's kind of where I'm sitting like, I wonder, you know, does this give us any kind of evidence if this kind of dips low and maybe it doesn't even make it down to 308? You know, it tries, but it doesn't get down there. And instead it reverses. Does that give you some evidence that this could actually still be very bullish in some ways? And the answer is yeah, it does. I think that reversal from a technical standpoint could lead you back to the 390. You can see right there. So if you're somebody that's like concerned about getting out of a position or whatever, I can't tell you that you should just wait because it's definitely going to work out. I can't say that. But what I can say is that if this happens to have this reversal here and it goes back above specifically like where it dropped off this ledge here at like 335 with some support, I think it's got a good chance it's going to run all the way. If it ends up going lower, I think there's a lower probability that it runs all the way. I think you might get back to 350 on a rebound. But I think if it sort of stops where it's at right now and can get back above that 330, what is it, like 332, 331, isn't that the level we marked off to, that 331 level? I think you've got a good chance that it's going to potentially go all the way back up to 390 at least in this kind of a move. And again, you might say, well, it didn't happen quite the way you expected. No, but we also know that this has been on the chart for a while. Like we talked about what that might look like, and we're seeing it play out. And that's the advantage of having a broader view of technical analysis that doesn't just go with the flow of, hey, it's always going to be bullish, right? It's always going to do exactly what we want it to do. Instead, we're going to look at it and say, all right, critically, like here's what's happened in the past. Here's what we see if it does this or that. And now we have a little bit of a better model for understanding, okay, where are these reactive levels potentially going to go? So I'm of the opinion that 350s and 390s are not off the table just yet. I genuinely believe that that's possible. We're going to come back up there for AMC. It's a different story for GME. GME's got some problems. It's got to get back above this 26 before I can really say much else. Frankly, the way this traveled is kind of odd. This is a massive gap. I find it to be strange because the price action, and I don't want to get into like gory details about it per se, but the price action here did close pretty much right on the same spot as that previous offering. The what's odd to me is they'd already sold down. So when I had done certain measurements early on, I had actually already measured this in. We had talked about this and we said like, well, it could come back down to here. And this is a new kind of view that we did yesterday, but this was like end of the day yesterday after the move. But we had talked about it potentially coming back to near 25, 26 area and still being healthy because of that drop. So what's strange to me is like it had already set up on the 50% marker there. There'd already been like a sell-off from the top. And then it camps itself right on. So to me, it's like somebody obviously knew that was going to happen. I don't know why you would, come back to that same level. And then when we look back at the previous offerings as well, like these two areas over here, it's the same area. So I'm not really sure what the insider information is other than like it seems that Cohen's been doing these offerings above 24, specifically around this like 28 area. Maybe it's again baked in somehow. So-and-so wanted to get the price to such and such whatever. They knew they were going to get the offering. I don't know. I really don't. I couldn't tell you. But there's something kind of odd about that because now when I look at the drop that was made, I'm like, well, from that previous offering, it dropped pretty far. It was like a 25% drop or something. I think that's very strange to me, again, because if you look at where the top was here, it would have been fine. Like it would have been healthy to have dropped from the tip top. Instead, we set up a little early into it, come back to the same target. And of course, if you're at the same level, it's going to drop to the same level, right? Which is this 2079 region, potentially even double bottoming. And I'm just curious about that. I'm not really sure what to expect. The other marker here, this could have been baked in as well. This is from 30, and that goes down to 23 or 2260. On the bigger picture, what makes me the most concerned, I suppose, is that this is a sign of weakness. I already talked about that. Even though, yeah, it could have been a spring had this continued to hold here and cross up. It did not, at least right now. So you drop through the creek again, which makes this look a whole lot more like a UT, which is an upthrust, which is a distributive action just to peak above the top. It sets a marker for later, potentially. Kind of solidifies that marker, I should say. But if you peak above the top like that and then drop back through the creek, it's no bueno. Now, that being said, on the bigger picture, we saw a series of parallels. And you can see when we walked down into a spring back in April of 2024, there was a very similar motion here along this parallel structure. And when we took this back out and we looked at iterations yesterday, and I won't go way into detail on this, but I'll just say that we did the iterations, and this made a lot of sense that you may actually have a very similar move here. It may not go that low. It may not go as low as this bottom parallel, which is around or under 17 rather. But, and I said previously, like 17 isn't out of the question. It's just not my preferred place to go, right? And you win some, you lose some, right? We get some really good call outs, and then some other times it's like the technicals don't go your way. There's an offering. I could sit here and say, I told you so, man. Well, I know. But at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. If you're waiting for something to happen because you expected this to go down and it happened, it's going to feel great. Just like sometimes I'm waiting for something to go up. I don't know what's going to happen, and then it happens. You feel great. But at the end of the day, you really just don't know. I mean, you're not all powerful, all seeing or something like that. So there's nothing really particularly noteworthy about it from a technical standpoint other than like, where are you now? That's kind of the big thing. So I'm looking at this as like a wedge that's already had like a thrust down, a thrust up. It's not impossible. I've said this before. It's not impossible that this is a kind of double M. But again, I would not have expected it to go this low. So like it would have made sense to me to be like this, because this to me makes sense as a creek cross, because you're hitting the edge of that wedge, right? Coming back above it and then landing on top of it. That's where the breakdown again comes to fruition, is like you don't have that. So this could have been a highly volatile move, and I would have been like very comfortable with that. I would have said, okay, that makes sense because it was super volatile over here. But when it drops below, it no longer feels like that's as likely because it's now beneath that resistance. So when I look backwards at what happened previously, they use that as an opportunity to kind of like distribute right here off of a bottom. So it would have related to like this low versus this low. And again, you can kind of see the similarities here, the way this sets up. It attempts to do a bit of a creek cross here, and then it fails, it comes back down, chops for a bit, and then drops. And this would be very likely to happen if it kind of just sits here for a while underneath 26. Again, potentially just kind of dropping into the August deadline that we've talked about. So I'm not going to give you guys like a play-by-play just yet, but I would suggest that 26 is going to be a ceiling for the moment. And if it gets above that, great. You could have a change of character here. But if not, that's probably going to be the ceiling for the time being. There's just a lot going on right here, right at like 25.80s. So any kind of reaction today would be nice for a lot of people. But if it kind of lingers too long, you might get like a 10% reaction. But I think if it lingers too long under here, you're likely going to just see continuation and then a build out into a drop later. Okay. Again, I don't know exactly one-to-one how that's going to affect AMC, so I'm kind of treating them as separate beasts for now. I still think that even if this reacted back up to 26 and then just kind of chopped here with variable up thrusts, I still think AMC could still have more upside. Sometimes that happens, or GME is kind of stagnant, AMC is running, and vice versa, where AMC sits really stagnant for a while, GME is running. Don't think they're lockstep. I don't. So lately they have been on this move down, but it would not surprise me if one of them broke out and the other one didn't, right? And the ups are just more extreme on one versus the other. So I'm looking at this, and I got to get back to this because I've kind of left it hanging. This is possible, okay? But there is one other kind of possibility here, which does happen sometimes, and that's the shallow S curve. And when that happens, what occurs is that when it gets to this level, and this is the key, this is the most important thing. When it gets to this level roughly, and it's not always like that perfect. It's actually probably more perfect than it should be. But when it gets back to this level, because it doesn't look quite the same over here, you get a cross up instead of kind of dropping down. It could have a backup, like an SOS with a backup, but it ultimately will come up at some point and cross up here into a more proper SOS, and then it takes off. If that happens, then this is actually kind of treated in my mind like what I call like a slingshot. Specifically, don't use the term spring unless it's relating to a sideways range, but it's more like a slingshot. And so typically what happens here is that if there's an extremity that was missed, so for example, you may have like a slightly steeper trend here, or maybe even another one from like another particular angle, right, that goes a bit higher. The slingshot tends to be like a continuation of like a more macro move anyways. So it'd be like some bigger picture, like, okay, we didn't come up here and check this. And in our case, I think the only one I could make a strong case for is the 461 at this point. 430s was another one, but that's a support that I'm not as sure about. But 461 was one that could be possible, and that would be like that layup move. So that is a slingshot. That doesn't happen very often. We'd have to find evidence on price action, not just on balance, that that's possible. So on the on balance, it wouldn't be a big trouble, I guess I should say, to see that occur. You can see right now we've already had, in my opinion, that breakdown. It's happened right here. The reaction seems pretty reasonable as like a UTAD kind of reaction, but an And a shallow S-curve would have to jump here and then continue. You have to go up above. It usually look like that, and then it would continue. And there'd have to be some other kind of target in mind, right? I'm not exactly sure where it would be. We've got one level around 51. That was one that I marked off a long time ago, and another level up here at like 63. 51 seems possible because I'm looking at this like, oh, well, there's this guy right here. It's a little farther out, but that's a possibility. I'm specifically going from, it should be right actually on this one, sorry. Especially looking at this breakdown right there. It's usually like the steeper, the first, I should say, cross up right there. And that would be it. So that would make sense. That's a possibility. But we really need to find more evidence of that on price action right now, less so on balance still. The thesis for on balance has already been met. In my opinion, it could be done. So I'm not really going to hold my breath for it. I think it could be finished. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, it's down 20%. It's not really changing very much. It tried to make a little rebound here, back up to 24. It failed. Bears like it beneath 24, so just keep that in mind. 24 is a really long-standing level for GME. Really important level. If you go to 24, mark it off, you'll see what I mean. That's like 23.95. Let's get it right. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most important level that we have. And I marked it off a long time ago. I've marked it off ever since. I think this is largely where you're at right now in terms of trading range. Between 24 and 26, that area is the most important support resistance right now. So everything below, you could look at it from a bull perspective and think, well, everything below then should be bought up, right? That's one way to look at it, is that everything below that could be bought up. But from a range standpoint, there's a lot of other things that could happen here. So like as a range goes, this could be extremely dynamic. Can go pretty low, could still come back up, but it would be very odd. It'd have to have some kind of big reversal. Just looking at it from like a helicopter view, that level, yeah, I mean, if you're just kind of buying off liquidity, you might say that, well, I don't really care about this or that. I just want to see if it's going to hold up, right? So what? It broke this ice. There's another one, Booksy. Maybe it's not going to break this guy or something, right? So there's still another one right here. I could just see this as like a buy-up opportunity between 20 and 24. And every time I do that, it's been going up back above it, so on and so forth. Yeah. I still think, I still would contest that it would been far stronger to just bounce off 26 here and actually show that this is indeed going to be a support, which is yet to become. Like, this has not been a support, and it's really struggled. Again, you take it for what it is, and what it is right now is it's really had difficulty. The only time we had any support on this, there were two times. One was December 3rd, and the other was May 7th. And both have now resulted in drops back beneath that same support. So they just kind of pump up and drop, pump up and drop. Neither is held above it. So historically, even back here, it just barely kind of bounced and then went back through it and then distributed. This hasn't been support since, like a real strong support since May 2021. I mean, these are all breaking through it, and this is just distribution. It tried to act as support here, but ultimately it didn't even hold it. It didn't have stopping power. Just continual sign of weakness. This is the last time it really held with some serious strength and pushed you up to like a higher range. This is a reactive move. So there's not much to say about it other than it just hasn't been support. It might be part of the reason why Cohen's been doing this, because it spent, I think it was like 18 months going across it earlier, and this is where we're consolidating now. And anytime we've come back above that 24, it seems like we've been, you know, offering. So say what you will about it. It seems like a pretty critical level for that reason. But you can't expect to just kind of always come down through it and then bounce through it. You know, it has to make that higher low and then jump back above. So I'm all for like being optimistic in some cases. Like optimism is not like a bad thing. But you have to be realistic as well and just say, well, you don't know what you don't know. There's a chance, I suppose, that this holds. There's also a good chance it just bounces and heads through like a spring. I didn't even do this on purpose, but that's where it is. I kind of think I was looking back at this guy. There's just so much that could happen here that it's a bit too much for me to suggest that it's going to immediately reverse. But sure, could it be that this, from a liquidity standpoint, anytime it dives beneath like 24 is being bought up? Yeah, it's possible, right? And whoever got the previous offering probably wouldn't want it to go beneath here either, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't, okay? That's just me spitballing anyways. So I'm less surprised about AMC. I'm more surprised about, I see SPY. It's trying. I don't know if it's actually reversed yet, but it's trying. See, it's doing that thing right here where it's coming up beneath. It needs to jump right here, back above. I think it hasn't quite gotten there yet, the strength. I'm less surprised about AMC. I think AMC to me has been to me it's like, well, I don't see why it wouldn't come back down kind of the whole time, but I've also been thinking that it might still have one more hoorah in it. Not just because of what happened in 2021, but that is a big part of it. I mean, one of the reasons we've been looking at this so intently with the on balance volume is because of what happened in 2021 with that setup having that big wave that ultimately, and it's starting to look again like this could just be like a UTAD here and here, right above this top. This is where those up thrusts have happened. And that's why I'm like, I don't know, pretty much just say you're done. But certainly like there was this element of, and I repeat this a lot, but there was certainly an element of like, well, 2020, 2021, that region had a very similar markup pattern on the leading up to the big positioning on the on balance volume. And that's why we used that comparison quite a bit. And that had to do with this setup right here. Don't you like how clean that is? So we were in this mode of like, well, it's not exactly one-to-one. What would make the most sense is coming back low. But we certainly were in this mode right here. We had come down low. We had failed to kind of make advances, right? And so we built out like kind of a bottoming period. And then we jumped a creek and we saw that advancement in the local time frame. And this looks like that reactive move. This was partially why we were thinking it was going back to 4, also because it never went back to 4 to recheck it, which was in line with what we saw as an iterative motion, which you can use fractals for, that's fine. But I was really just thinking about it in terms of this is the way the stock's been behaving. We got that big upthrust in May and then went into that distributive motion down. I was expecting something similar to that and seeing it kind of a micro version of it. But what was significant with the on balance wasn't that it just was like a rinse and repeat, which by the way, this is a rinse and repeat, right? You may not think it is because you don't see it, you don't want to see it, but it is a rinse and repeat in terms of an iterative model here, over and over and over again, right? And it's just going down into the same mode over and over until it can't anymore. It doesn't have any more left in it, and it's already made the appropriate moves. This doesn't just happen in a vacuum, it's happening according to like the whole range. But I would say that it's essentially the exact same concept. And what's most noteworthy here is, again, where did it go when it kind of built out, you know? So we're in this mode right now where we already broke out, but we didn't push above the previous top. We definitely didn't go up to the widening. We've just looked at it a minute ago. It didn't go up that high. I could do a side-by-side, but this is fine. We're just going to use our brains and remember. It hadn't even come above this top yet, because we were just saying, like, well, it didn't make that move. This isn't exactly equivalent, though, is it? No. Because in the current model, this goes really, really far. Like in the current time frame, this goes really, really far. And it does come back up like one more time, and it kind of peaks at this top already, like this. This is more or less what you see, okay? And that's what we're seeing in the current time frame. There's maybe a little bit of difference there, but you know what I mean. That's basically what we're seeing. So we hadn't even done that yet. All we've done is come back up to this peak, and that's it, right? So it's possible, again, that we're in this kind of like sell-off mode. Granted, this looks pretty different than what we're experiencing right now. There's the M right there. So it dropped down. There's the cat ear. This one doesn't break down. Doesn't have some kind of a dip low. But again, does that mean it couldn't possibly have that? No. Like we've seen this before where it's had like kind of a shallow S curve and drop real low. It could still react back up. This doesn't make you think it's necessarily going to go to 460, you know, and this is a 4-hour time frame. This just kissed the top of it and dropped. Where we currently are, the 4-hour is, I think, beneath us. But if you went to the daily, it's right there. It's a similar kind of section. So we could look at that too. Maybe that's where the daily is. But this is what I meant when I said that markup could have a kind of a reactive move back. So the M here, I don't think this is divergent, but it's not, because in this case, this was going up as well. But you do get a bit of a slingshot here off the bottom. And it looks like, yeah, that first marker was used, which is right here. So it does seem like it was used right there. Not bad. It might have even been like a 50-50. Even though it wasn't on the price action, it definitely looks like it was on balance, doesn't it? Like a double up motion. So let's take a look now at the current time frame with all that information. We could look at GME fall if you guys want to look at it fall. It's down 19%. I'm not a big fan of just watching a stock go down. What is a acquisition? It's where you buy like another company or you buy something. Acquisition could come in a lot of different forms, but the idea of buying another company is more typical. And it's a little different than, like, let's say buying Bitcoin, which is more of an investment. If you bought shares in another company, you could have ownership of that company. That could be considered an acquisition if you bought enough shares. But that depends on the company's bylaws and what that actually means. If you buy like a majority share position, you know, things like that. It's kind of what that really traditionally an acquisition is, just buying out another company, right? That's all there is to it. And specifically, the two things that are often talked about are diversification and acquisition. So diversification is you're taking a business and you're kind of working through different avenues for revenue. So you're not just depending on one thing. But specifically with diversification, they're not looking just at alternative revenue streams. They're looking at what does that revenue stream depend on. That's more important. So like you could have a ton of diversification in the gaming industry, but you know, it's like selling digital games and selling games, cartridge games. It still depends on like just selling software. Like it's a similar thing. Yeah, there's more, maybe more lucrative things, but like that's different than like collectibles, which is a different um, product, right? Altogether. So like what AMC did with diversification was appropriate. The popcorn sales is now like a retail grocery business. That's not the same because it's not even in the same, technically the same market, right, as movie industry. Like if the movie industry collapsed, could they still sell popcorn? Yeah. Would they probably do as well? No. If AMC didn't exist as a sit-in movie theater. But it is an appropriate diversification because you're basically now you got a different market that you're selling some different product to. It's similar, right? You have the brand recognition, but so that's a better way to understand diversification, I suppose. It's very simplified version of that. But acquisition is like when AMC bought the silver/gold mine, but I think it's mostly silver, right? The HYMC. That's an acquisition. Is it a good acquisition? Time will tell. But it certainly also diversified, right, their holdings, because now in times of inflation or whatever, if they've got tangible goods, and rare earth minerals and stuff, blah, 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 you've got a pretty decent chance that that's not going to be hit in the same way, so on and so forth. There could be bad acquisitions too. You could buy a company that ultimately doesn't do well. That just hurts your bottom line. The big thing with GameStop that I was concerned about is like, people are saying like, they said it in the Discord group a little bit ago, and I'm a little bit miffed by it because I'm like, all right, just whatever, we gotta trust me, bro. Kind of, I said this beforehand. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that the problem with what I see is that typically offerings don't happen. That it's not that they never happen, okay? But the frequency of offerings that we've seen for GameStop, for example, I feel like Cohen's taking advantage of the strength of the company and the resilience of the companies based on the retail, which is good. It's very smart to do that in some ways, because had AMC done that when it was at $60, even though the voters wouldn't let them do it at that time, nobody wanted them to dilute at that time. Had they done it high up, I think it would have been a very different story. Those are things that you could have bolstered the bottom line of the company without necessarily dumping the stock right away if it had that much buying pressure at that time. I think he's leaning into the buying pressure maybe a little too much. And to me, the thing is that that's typically like a distressed signal. If you're not able to raise cash except through offerings, that's not usually a good sign for the company. So normally, like if a company is in a free fall, they start doing, like AMC, for example, has been really low. They start doing offerings because they're not making enough cash elsewhere. So it's like a way for them to raise money. And I think Adam Aaron actually said it at one point that if they can't raise money through this, they're going to go bankrupt. That's a sign of a distressed company, because they're basically saying that we can't afford what we need to pay. We can't afford to continue with the assets that we have because it's too much. We're burning too much cash. We need to be able to raise money because we're not creating enough revenue to cover our costs. That's an issue. That's a big problem. That's the short thesis right there. That's a reason to short a company down. So part of the reason why these sell-offs happen is because they see it as a kind of a chink in the armor. I think this is sort of a testing of the water right here. I'm not saying that, again, this results in definite downside or definite upside, but it certainly seems to be the case that Cohen seemed to understand, and the board, I suppose, seemed to understand that this has been pretty resilient in this range thus far, and they're using that. But I was a little concerned because I was like, well, AMC or GME already has like billions of dollars like on hand in cash. To do another offering doesn't really make sense. Somebody in the Discord said that they thought it made sense because of the resilience, and they're just going to keep doing it here. I'm like, look, maybe that writing was on the wall to some degree, but I can't justify that unless there's something else. Because you're basically just saying that we're in distress. Like, you're kind of continually signaling that we can't raise this money elsewhere, so we're just doing this to raise money. And I'm like, I don't get that. And in some ways, it's kind of like gamifying the market, using retail, using the buyers of your stock, and kind of hoping that sellers don't, cause the buyers to fail or falter. It's just an odd strategy unless you have something else in mind and you're raising enough capital that even if we made an acquisition, we'd still have billions of dollars in the war chest, right, for a rainy day. So if they had like $8 to $9 billion and they make, like what you're saying, Moonlit, they made like a $4 billion acquisition, I mean, that's a huge deal, right? It could be a really important move for the company. We didn't hear anything about that. Now, they had their shareholder meeting, I guess, this morning, or they're having it shortly. I think it's at like 10. Is that right? And they're in Plano, Texas, which, is not too far from where I live, but I know where that is. But if they're at 10 a.m., then that's still coming up. So Adamir in this, GME that, all distractions from the next move, market correction. Nobody's distracting from anything. What are you talking about? Who are you talking about? No one's distracting anybody. And no one's talking about not having a market correction. I mean, this is the stuff that I have on my chart right here. Retail is distracted. I don't think so. I mean, some retail probably, but on this channel, we've been talking about how this is coming to a top for a while, and like there needs to be some kind of corrective measure. But an idea of a correction is a little different depending on which ticker you're talking about. I mean, a 10% correction on something like the S&P 500, that's not like a huge deal. But you could look at that on other tickers and suggest that you're probably going to have a big drop, at some point in the future for AMC, like to a new low, which is what I've been suggesting the whole time. This is not me saying that the market's going to go up necessarily. So I don't see why that would be a distraction unless you're just like consumed with it. There's nothing wrong talking about individual tickers and what's going on. You kind of have to do that. Because everybody performed okay on this run up, but like there were drastic differences in timing and other variables that did impact, I think, how far certain things went versus others. So there's nothing wrong with talking about an individual company's bottom line or their issues. That doesn't make any sense. I don't like the idea of calling it like a distraction. Yeah, this went down. That's okay. I know where you're coming from because, yes, like if you go probably to your social media sites, which I don't participate in, but if you go to your social media sites, I'm sure that people are going crazy about this and that. It might be till August. But remember that sometimes that final move maybe really weak or muted on something like the S&P, you might get a really muted move up to like 613. We can suggest that that doesn't go beyond 26 right now, but if it did, it would be pretty volatile. Even if SPY is only running like 5% or 3%, or if the IWM is only running 5% or 3%, that's what we saw back here. I'm not suggesting it's exactly the same, but I am saying that like we did see the same thing back here. The market was going into correction phase going into May 15th. You look at the IWM back here in May, and there was a long-term sideways down right after that. And it was already kind of trending that direction. I'm not saying, again, it's going to be one-to-one, but it would be silly to kind of think that you couldn't have any kind of final move, you know. So this is where we were in May, right here. So like you could be saying, and I could be saying, well, there is a market correction coming. We're both right about that, I think. I think we're going to be right about that. I think there will be some kind of a correction. This was the correction that started in May, though, and it really started here. If you look backwards at this, this is already exhausted. The volume's dead. And there's one final hurrah here, and then it heads down. This is like nothing. This is like nothing on IWM. It just pushed over the top and started a distribution. I mean, look at the move right there. That's the final move for the broader market. It's a 2% move. That's like nothing, right? This is when AMC and GME ran like 300%. Right here, like in 2 days. So the concept of like there being this like market correction, this is a big long-term boring kind of sideways correction. That totally with you on that. Like I think that we're likely at that place. I've been saying it for a while that we're probably at this spot where we may not get much higher than this. If we're lucky, we'll come up. I said probably at around 220s here. I'm not sold on that idea, for example, on IWM. Right now, it looks like this is a wedge. It's having some trouble. And if it reverses, I'll leave that marker there. I'm not going to like get rid of that. But if it reverses and goes back up, there's a chance it could come back up and redistribute on the basis of a channel mark. And I wouldn't put it very far, but maybe this distance right here. It's not very much. But that does get you there. That's like 3 to 4%, you know, final hoorah. It's also possible that 3 to 4% is already done. But I think this is a bit of an M cross. I think it's possible there's one more. Not guaranteed, but it's possible. And I know that we've looked at wave counts before, like this. And this hasn't been met yet. And I'm not saying it has to be met, but again, that's the region. So would it be reasonable to see this come up and check 221, you know, and hit this outer wall? I think so. It'd also be reasonable to see just go ahead and capitulate and come down. You know, we don't know what we don't know. Maybe it is done. That fifth wave is finished. It's over. But if it had one last hurrah that goes up, I wouldn't put it past AMC and GME to do something a little bit more volatile, you know, into a top. It's not out of the question. So, again, I'm not saying like it's definitely going to happen. That would be irresponsible. But the idea of this having like a bigger push here, I don't think that's a distraction. I think it's possible. Then, yeah, it's downside, you know. I don't think there's any question about that for me. I've pretty much been resolved about that since, I don't know, a year ago. It's been a long time. It really has. It's been a long time, you know. We talked about it 2 years ago, even 2020. Well, was it like 2000? No, maybe it was a little over a year ago. I don't want to over-exaggerate it. It's just a little over a year ago. It was 2024. So yeah, no guarantees here, but I don't see why this couldn't come up and retest again, like on the 4 hour or the daily, you know, come into oversold territory or overbought territory one more time, really kind of hit those high marks and then be done. And I think that AMC and GME, that they don't always do it, so that's not an always kind of thing, but that's why we're doing the analysis. So yeah, I haven't really mentioned Adam Aaron. I don't either. I know you're talking about other people, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Adam Aaron does whatever Adam Aaron does and whenever he wants to do it. And I don't follow them on social media, so I don't know what they're saying. But let's double check. No one answered me about this GME thing, so I'm going to see if there's a shareholder meeting coming up. It says June 12th, Central Time, at 10 a.m. That's today. That's in about 15 minutes. So this could see some pretty crazy turnaround. I'm trying to remember if I have access to that. I think last time I did, but I had to do some weird stuff. Let's see. View the live stream of the annual meeting. I'll just view the live stream. I should be able to view it. All right, you guys want to stream it? We can. Starts in 15 minutes. Do you want me to do that? I can try to do it. You know my internet. United Healthcare? Yeah, I think it is. We got 15 minutes, or about 13 minutes, so we got some time. That could change things, if he announces what the heck they're doing. I think that could change some stuff here. May be a very different kind of day. Big swings up, big swings down kind of thing. So one of the differences was this 4 hour. Now, one could argue that, well, this already hit the 4 hour, and now this could be a distribution above the top of it. That's like similar to, I'm going back to where we were on AMC. That's similar to where we were talking about previously when we were talking about the 2021 model. That's similar, hits it and then comes back above it, distributes. That could be the end of it. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we really think that this was the level that was intended to be hit, and that they may want to, I should say, distribute above it in order to get more people on board and really get that final push here. Can we make a strong case in the next few minutes on this to suggest that maybe it goes, I'm going to delete some of this stuff, that maybe it goes up to this point? Maybe. So what we can do is look at the low, and we can look at this as a 50-50 top. That's what happened in 2021. It does push higher than this distribution level. I think it would be appropriate to push higher than that. Although it's not exactly like what we would expect, it is indeed a kind of widening, because this did come below this bottom and this would become above this top. So I'm looking back at this last leg up, which was October 2024 to December. That certainly would be evidence of a kind of a widening spread there if it came above that top. This does give you a 50-50, guys, over the top here to 51 million. And I think, again, that level was sort of like the secondary stopping point for me. I could see that being the place that you stop, as opposed to way up here at 63. I certainly could see that. So then we can definitely make that case here. All right. Can we make a case that this comes up above and hits like 420? Well, we already did that earlier. We did the measurement. It seemed like, weird as it was, because I didn't think 420 was likely, but weird as it was, sure. This certainly looks like the 50-50 up above, what was it, 362? Yeah, I think it actually does work. I'm going to try to actually mark it off, 362 here. Yeah, from where it currently stands on the bottom, 50-50 would get you back over this top. It would take you not quite as high as expected, but more like 420. That's assuming that it's an actual 50-50 and it doesn't stop at 390, which is possible. But I think it's likely going to go here or beyond. And the reason I think that is because these moves, this just didn't move very far. Like, it moved really fast in the beginning, but then when it started having these up thrusts, I was really curious as to why this wasn't really hiking up. Didn't really hike up until here. So it'd be really odd to see it go from 40 million all the way to 51 here and do that kind of a stretch without a similar move. That's a bigger move than this one by a good margin. So you can see like that's considerably larger. It's probably, I don't know, at least 30%, maybe even 50% bigger. It looks like a 50% larger move. Yeah, 50% bigger. So that would make me think that you need to get proportionally a move that's about 50% bigger than this move if the volume is the same, which is quite big. I mean, it's a huge move. So let's take a look. I don't know if this proportionally makes any sense, but I'll try it anyways. Yeah, so you see what I mean? Like the on balance volume, in order to hike that far, you need to have the actual volume input. That's 533. That's really far. Like, would not expect that. So basically, that's like the gap fill. I don't even know what that is. That's really far. It's essentially testing that top again. That's super far. My guess is that 461 is like right in the middle of those two levels. It's like right there. So yeah, I would say it's possible that these could be in view. These are extended targets in my opinion. So we got like 420. I don't know what else would be there at 420 that would stop you other than just, again, hitting that floor. It's definitely a part of that region of the floor. 461 made more sense because it was like a middle support here. I like that one better for a number of reasons. And it had the most hits on the P&F chart. I felt like that one was really strong. Plus, it's got support and gaps here. But then let's go to the daily real quick. And let me just take a look. Yeah. So if you were comparing that 4 hour in 2020, 2021 to the daily here, it would be reasonable to say that this could come up just above and then redistribute back beneath the daily. That's essentially the exact same pattern right here. So certainly 421 not out of the question. Regardless, it looks like it would be possible that if it got up here, you could get above. And that 390, man, that's right on the dot right now. Look at that. It's right where that creek intersection is and the daily. So it's really just a question of like distribution and like how far you need to go in order to really pump that on balance volume. So I'm not really sure. It's giving me good vibes though. I'm really not sure why. But I feel like there seems like a strong likelihood that this is still going to happen. But I'm going to see what the heck the price action says about that. Because in order for that to occur, you'd also have to have some kind of a reasonable, like this is reasonable to me here, this one. That one's already on the chart. That one doesn't seem out of the question, especially if it broke here. I could see this going up and then redistributing right there in this little pocket. That is right where it needs to be. And there's the blue line. That would be like the breakdown on the cat ear. But what about higher markers? I suppose that's really the same. I'm going to do something a bit unusual, I suppose. I'm going to use a small time frame if I can. I'm trying to see where that is. I think it's here because there was a support. It's hard to see, and I know there's a couple different spots, so I'll use two, but there's, I've talked about this level. I'm not really sure why. I don't think this wick is that trustworthy. So it could be a little bit higher. It could be right there. Actually, still looks better. Both of them are at play. I'm not sure it matters. Anyways, this right here looks like a walk down. And then this is the drop zone here and here. So walking through those. So we repeatedly hit the same marker over and over and over again. But it was actually going across these trends. And then the double top, that's where I'm trying to see, and I can't really see it very well. Double top motion right there. So points of interest would be, of most interest, I suppose, would be here, off the gap, but I actually think right there. So this is pretty likely, I think, this one. This one is just a little bit different. So potential for coming up to this zone, and there is potential for coming up to this zone, although I think that might be a bit too far. I've said that enough. It doesn't seem out of the question to me. This isn't even that far from that mark. This one would make the most sense, I think, if it hit the 461 right there. That's on Monday the 16th. So that's next Monday. Because remember, pivots are interesting, and the idea of a slingshot's really interesting because it's usually like, again, it's like 50% reduction across some midline. In this case, it looks a little high. This one does. And then let me check it out with the actual middle mark. Ooh, that's where that gap is, right there. So that might give us more evidence that it doesn't come that high. It actually hits here at perhaps even today, which is kind of crazy. But that is the 50% swing over the, it's like 420 by tomorrow. I wonder. He's about to start talking. I don't know. A few minutes. I'm gonna do something I don't normally do because I'm feeling like some kind of way about this. I'm going to actually kind of double down on my calls here, which may seem really irresponsible, and it might be. But I don't know. There's something about this setup. I can't quite shake it, especially going into next week. I wouldn't go any sooner than that. I just think we're going to get that reaction back up to at least 390. It's the way this transition down. I mean, it could go lower. Don't get me wrong, it could. But if it doesn't go below like 3 and it reverses and it comes back above, I think that's going to be really bullish. And I think you're going to go ahead and go for that 50-50 up. And I'm seeing that consistency there with the wave down and like that slingshot model, oddly as it may seem, to do that. And I know it's odd. Putting a lot of trust in a really small amount of opium here. Maybe too much. Well, the deed is done. If I fail, I will fail in front of an audience. There's just something about it. I can't quite shake it. I was thinking about it back here, and I said I thought it kind of just reminded me of that shallow S-curve. And now I'm looking at this like, it may already be there. Like this is the 50-50 down. I mean, I get that the bigger one might not be quite there yet, but the range isn't this low. This was like an extreme drop way down here. The range really seems to be here. And that makes me think it's kind of finished. And if it did come back up, it would have to come back to at least this 360. So it's a pretty bullish move. I know that seems a bit much, but that's the 50-50 from here to that 360 area. And that is where you start seeing the layups. I know, again, it seems like a bit much. Maybe too much hopium. But that is really critical with the slingshots. These drop ledges end up being little markers. If it hits 307, or even slightly lower, I'm going to be looking at this. It may need to go down lower. May need to get like a spring. That would propel you over the top. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, that markup gets you there. And then the next one takes you right up to this zone where we're talking about these levels above 4 again. It's not hard to imagine. And with the on balance the way it is, I'm going to do it. I mean, you guys do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to pressure anybody. And obviously it seems like maybe a dumb move right now, but I honestly think there's something odd about the two setups. Like there may need to be one more drop. So that's something to consider. Is this a retrace maybe from the bottom as well? It probably is. Yeah, that was the 618. The 786, oh look at that, it's right there. The 786 and the 854 are right in between that. I have like it dead on right there. So that's a 786 and an 854 retrace. So I'm going to get rid of that because it's messy. Do not trade this if you do not want to trade it, and if you don't feel comfortable trading it, you shouldn't trade it. Don't do that to yourself. If you want me to, I'll try to stream this. Let me see if I can get the stuff adjusted. It's a little complicated when I do this. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So let me see if I got it right.
Holders. Thank you for being one.
Thanks, Ryan. The rules of conduct and the agenda for today's meeting are posted on the virtual meeting portal.
Super quiet.
In order to conduct an orderly and efficient meeting, we ask that participants abide by the rules. Brooke Webb of Computershare has been appointed to act as an inspector of election for this meeting. Ms. Webb took an oath of inspection of election prior to the meeting. We also have members of our board of directors participating today, as well as members of our management and representatives from KPMG LLP, our independent registered public accounting firm.
All right.
Although KPMG has indicated that it does not wish to make a statement, the representative is available to respond to appropriate questions during the question and answer period. If any stockholders here today have not yet voted and would like to do so, you may submit your vote during this meeting until the polls are announced closed. April 21st, 2025 was set by resolution of the Board of Directors as the record date for today's annual meeting. All stockholders of record or their proxy holders at the close of business on April 21st, 2025 are entitled to vote at the annual meeting. We have made available for inspection a listing of stockholders as of the record date at our corporate office in accordance with the requirements of the Delaware General Corporation Law. Notice of this meeting was duly given in accordance with the company's bylaws and Delaware law. We received an affidavit from Broadridge Financial Services certifying that the notice of annual meeting and proxy statement were sent to stockholders beginning on April 30th, 2025. The affidavit is available for inspection by any stockholder upon request and will be filed with the company's records. At the close of business on April 21st, 2024, the record date for this meeting, there were 447,300,514 shares of the company's Class A common stock, with 1 vote per share identified as outstanding and entitled to vote on all matters presented at this meeting. There are present at this meeting, in person or by proxy, more than a majority of all the shares entitled to cast votes at this meeting. Based on confirmation by the Inspector of Election, I find that a quorum is present and this meeting is duly constituted for the transaction of business. Each of the matters to be considered today is described in the proxy statement, which was made available as described in the notice of annual meeting. The proxy statement has been filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission and can be found on the Securities and Exchange Commission's website and our website. The first item on our agenda is a proposal to elect 5 directors, with each to serve as a director until the annual meeting of stockholders in 2025 and until his successor is duly elected and qualified. The company's nominees are Mr. Cohen, Mr. Attell, Mr. Chang, Mr. Groovy, and Mr. Turner. The second item on our agenda is a proposal to approve, on a non-binding advisory basis, the compensation of the named executive officers of the company. The third item on our agenda is a proposal to ratify the Audit Committee's appointment of KPMG as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for the company's fiscal year ending January 31st, 2026. No stockholder director nominations or stockholder proposals were properly submitted under SEC Rule 14A8 or in accordance with the company's advance notice or proxy access bylaw provisions. It is now 10:07 a.m. Polls are open and stockholders are welcome to vote on the 3 proposals. Anyone who wishes to change their previous vote or has not yet voted and wants to vote should at this time cast their vote electronically. The polls will be open until the conclusion of any questions related to the specific matters under consideration at this meeting. We will now use this time to answer any stockholder questions on the specific matters under consideration at this meeting. You may submit questions through the meeting portal. Okay, I see a number of questions related to our recently announced convertible notes offering and our capital market strategy. I think generally I would say that we have raised capital only when we believe it's in the best interest of our shareholders and do believe it's an attractive financing product given the terms. As publicly announced, we are offering $1.75 billion aggregate principal amount of 0% convertible senior notes due 2032. The offering also does include an option for the initial purchasers to purchase an additional $250 million of notes. Additional information related to that offering is available in our press release that we issued yesterday. Relatedly, I see a number of questions just related to use of proceeds. One here from Venkata Sadi Alapati. Can you share any more details on the plan for the large amount of cash GameStop is holding? As we indicated in the press release, we plan to use the proceeds for general corporate purposes, including investments in accordance with our investment policy and potential acquisitions. We continue to review the best use of the cash and have empowered our investment committee to review opportunities. We do not intend to make acquisitions or investments simply because we have the cash. They have to be the right opportunity and have to be accretive for our shareholders. I see then a number of questions also related to Bitcoin or Bitcoin strategy. Russell Morrison asked, are there any future plans to purchase more Bitcoin? I think Ryan said it best when he said GameStop plans to follow the GameStop strategy. I would generally say that means having our investment committee make investment decisions and deploying our capital in the best interest of our shareholders. Otherwise, I think our public announcements and also Ryan's previous statements speak for themselves on this topic. We have authorized Bitcoin as a treasury asset pursuant to our investment policy and have empowered our investment committee with the ability to decide when and how much to buy. All right, a couple of questions about board size and composition and whether the company has any plans to change anything in that regard. First, I'd definitely like to thank Ms. Zhu for her dedicated service to the board since 2021. Her contributions were very valuable, and she will definitely be missed. Otherwise, we're currently satisfied with the size and composition of the board. Our Nom and Corp Gov committee is responsible for identifying qualified candidates and for recommending the director nominees for each annual meeting, and they'll continue to review those matters in the ordinary course. All right, I'm seeing a number of questions just related to the business, trading card expansion, et cetera. I think Ryan really touched on the business earlier, so I won't belabor that. But you can see from our financials that our collectibles business did grow in Q1 of 2025. We're definitely bullish on that segment. All right, I'm not seeing any further questions related to specific matters under consideration at the meeting. I declare that the polls are now closed. Inspector, please tabulate the votes on all of the proposals.
I'm pleased to report the results of the proposals as follows. Mr. Attell, Mr. Ching, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Gruby, and Mr. Turner have each received a majority of the votes cast, and they have been elected directors. The non-binding advisory vote on the compensation of the named executive officers of the company has been approved by a majority of the shares present or represented by proxy and entitled to vote on this proposal. And the ratification of our audit committee's appointment of KPMG LLP as independent registered public accounting firm for the fiscal year ending January 31st, 2026 has been approved by a majority of the shares present or represented by proxy and entitled to vote on this proposal.
I am not aware of any other business that should be brought before this meeting. This concludes the business of this meeting, and the annual meeting of stockholders is now adjourned. Thank you for your attendance and participation. We appreciate all the passion and support you, our stockholders, have for GameStop. This webcast will now end.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the meeting. Thank you for your participation, and you may now disconnect.
All right. I must have missed the early part, like the statement from the CEO and stuff. I don't remember any of that. So I guess they did the we joined at like the declaration and the business meeting. It was all like pretty done. So yeah, there's nothing else. I can't stream the music. You probably could rewatch it. It's only 15 minutes. It's not that long. But whatever. I don't really want to rewatch it. It must have been like a really brief statement. Well, that was a whole lot of nothing. Yeah. The guy seemed kind of annoyed with the questions. He was like sighing every time he read a question. I don't get it. What was there to be annoyed about? Just people want answers. Not like we're just raising money just because. He said like, well, we obviously raise money when we feel like we need to. And I'm like, dude, that doesn't make any sense. If you have billions of dollars, why do you feel like you need to right now? That doesn't justify it at all. So there's certainly things that, and he's talking about acquisitions. He said we wouldn't make acquisitions unless we feel that they're good acquisitions. And I'm like, what does that even, you know what I mean? I don't even know. You tell me, what do you guys think? I felt like it was very strange. Like they were annoyed that people have questions. I don't know. Why would we not, why would people not have questions? Yeah, that's the big trust me, bro. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's the way I heard it. Was I supposed to hear something else? It's very odd. Well, without like a news catalyst here, we'll see what happens. Oh boy. It looks kind of dead, doesn't it? The volume is really low on AMC as well. It's just a really slow move. Maybe there's something else cooking that we're not seeing. S&P 500 is, I moved them side by side so I could see better, but I'm going to probably move them back now that they're in a better position here. Oh, that's done. Well, at least it was short. The AMC meetings are super long. I just feel like they take forever. It is what it is. Maybe I misunderstood like what they were. Maybe because I missed the very first part of it. But it was only 15 minutes long, so I must have missed like 3 minutes of it. It's not like I missed a lot. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some kind of market-wide news, or maybe there won't be news at all. We'll see. Let's take a look at this on like the hourly. Let's go a little closer. Let's go a lot closer, actually. We'll look at this on like a 6-minute time frame. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. Okay, well, thus far, what we've gotten is a reaction. Yeah, I don't think it's very questionable. I'm still not convinced for GME that it's going to get over 26 right away. And that earnings call didn't really do anything. So Feels very degen. Yeah, didn't do anything. Yeah, I mean the S&P 500 still found support. It did a mild M cross here and then jumped up and over. And it was kind of mild. I think there's a lot of space, so I've kind of drew this on, I think I drew it on a higher time frame. It looks a little worse, or it looked a little bit tighter there, but this is actually kind of open. There's a lot of space, so this didn't even come near the bottom just yet. I don't know what that is. This is an M shape right here, so it pushed up, found a support, and then rose again and backed up. It looks like the backup, maybe this is what was in mind right here. So usually this is kind of like the termination point of like a bottom wave. So if there is a wave here, and I don't mean termination like it couldn't go lower, I just mean that's usually where the middle is. So there's ways of doing this as a result. So there's a bit of widening going on this downward push, but this would be considered like the middle of the wave. The reason for that, again, is wave schematics have that break above and then they come back down through, and that's where we talk about it on the stream quite a bit. So it's a way of measuring out a wave without knowing the necessarily exact details of it. You can still get a pretty good idea. I know I've done this a lot, but you never know. New people come on the stream all the time. So, but this is like a wave schematic where you have like top, and then you've created some kind of a resistance and support, come back down. So if it's an elevated one, I'll often look at the peak, right, and then see where it intersects the next part of the trend based on where that wave crosses. It seems like it's right there. So that would indicate like a wavelength. So then what I'm doing is I'm taking it from the top here and measuring out to that wavelength, and that extension should be the other side of that wave. That's just potential. It doesn't have to work out, but it's a good way of measuring and getting some timing down. It's very simple. So that should be about right. Another way to do it would be to try to estimate where this cross is, but I'm guessing it's the same. Like it probably wouldn't matter. So what I mean by that is if you took this and you did the next wave backwards and you went from here to here, that's probably where it happened, and it is. So it should be the correct length. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to go like way high or that it's even going to technically break out. I mean, it could hook here for all we know. So this just gives you an idea of like, hey, if it broke down, we probably would have a wave like here, right? Something like that if it broke down. And that would be appropriate. It may not be that, again, this is the bottom. Another thing I'll do sometimes is I'll look at the potential for a double, and I'll look at that here from this bottom across the middle, and that's right there. So again, if it went low, you might expect it to hit like a low point maybe tomorrow around the same time. If it goes high, which is possible, it still could hit a low here, and there's no real reason it couldn't. But one example for a breakout would be like that, right? And that would be coming back up. So you'd have some kind of sideways, and you come back up into the top at that time instead of underneath it at that time. And it could be even more extreme if it were to really break out. And for that, I would use like a completely different channel. Probably do this one and look at that last trajectory right there and see if that has some teeth to it. And it looks like it may. This is a pretty strong trend right here. But the bottom markers are not the best. None of them really line up. So there's a lot of weakness right here on this drop like somebody wanted to try to get through it. So that kind of bothers me. This is the most outer one, and it comes back in. And that's the one that has support, so actually gained support right there and pushed up. So this wavelength potentially could be way above there. That would be the case of probably a support here locally. So it'd back up and find a creek support here, make like a higher low. And then more than likely it would have to jump earlier. But who knows? Like an M cross up. It could move really hard. That actually looks like Monday though, like right on the dot. So I think this kind of tells me that Friday into Monday might be a big nothing burger, or Friday, end of Friday could be pretty much nothing. There's just a lot of potential there for nothing to happen. If you've got a lot of sideways action here in the works. But this does give me a good case for Monday push, some kind of good news on Monday, which we saw the same thing right here on AMC and GME. It looks like Monday right there, that intersection, like right around Monday. So yeah, GME is actually dropping now. It's going back down again. They did not give us good news, so it's going to go ahead and keep going for the time being. This seems reasonable though. Even if it went low here, I know it seemed kind of bad, but even if it went low here, it may not be the worst thing, because there are some other, like that's not too far down. Looking at this other one, I'm trying to remember where that comes from. I think that's just S-curve. I was really thinking about this guy right here. So sometimes if you lose a creek, or excuse me, if you lose a wedge, right? So there's usually like this rule of you can do like a percentage meeting target from top to bottom. It's like 61% or something. It can drop pretty low. And that we got that already. It was like 582. But there is another possibility, which is that this actually forms out into a channel that's not quite as low. And even there, sometimes that channel can be quite high. You can use any of those supports. I'm not a huge fan of like assuming it's going to do this. That's not a good idea to assume that you know that it's going to happen. But if it makes sense, like if there's previous interaction back here, and there is, that could be a place, again, a potential stop. On a drop that's not quite as severe as a 60% drop, right? Back to check some kind of creek body. It might even make more sense to do that if there's a localized, and there is, sign of weakness. So this is a localized SOW right here that went into a kind of a widening. It's really small, but this definitely gives you evidence that it could come down pretty low. And then if we take that, again, I don't know why I did that. I should have just left it on the screen. I just didn't want to clutter it up. Take that into consideration. Yeah, maybe. Look at where that took off from. Where it found support here as well. Yeah, it's possible that like 594 is in view. That's closer to where we see like the gap fill. Very close. That's 592. It's still a little bit, that's still a bit high compared to where you might think it would go. Unless it just doesn't fill it completely. That's just speculative. We're not there yet. Point being, Monday would be kind of the final, likely final move up on this model. We could see something similar to what we saw here, albeit maybe not exactly the same. I'm trying to look at the shape here. 1, 2, 3. So did this ever back up to it? It did not. It just kind of came across and went up, and then it got exhausted. What would that entail? much. I really think this is probably the best estimation if it were to go up again, that 611 area. So I'm thinking it's going to be a Monday kind of thing, a Friday, Monday kind of thing. But I don't know what would cause it. I'm not there yet. I also don't think that's the longest thing ever. This is probably the last thing. So I'm trying to figure out like the last move up. I'm trying to figure out where else that might come from, but I'm on a short time frame. Might be a little difficult to see. There's a trend here. Like downward motion. Let's do the hourly. Less visible, but it's probably still there. Roughly. That's like a creek. That looks like a head and shoulder almost. Yeah. So actually this is from another time frame, I think. So there is weakness here because this is divergent for sure from this peak to this peak. So make no mistake, this is a divergent kind of top. But again, it sort of depends on the scale, because this also is a cross up, and it's, yeah, there's weakness there, but it did make a higher low. It's the same kind of trap reversal that would work out on AMC right now, where it's technically like done, and bears already seem to like have it in the bag. Like they're like, oh, it's divergent, it's heading down, it's broken down here. So it's a contrarian play if you think that it goes back up. But it's the same idea of like hard reversal here probably pits you very high up, but abruptly and like on weakness, not on strength. So it's a sort of a maybe a gap up type run move that then just drives it back down the other way. Because it did jump this creek, and that to me is a really big deal. I mean, it's above it. So it does seem like it could have like that final push here, even though this is weak. And that's what I'm thinking, like maybe the weakness is already done. The divergence started, well, where did it start? Let's take a look. June 3rd. Yeah, that's just evidence that it may drop down to this zone right here at like 598. That was the same level we talked about earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a bit of an ABC correction that goes a little lower than expected, but results in an actual turn that goes back up pretty far before coming down again. Yeah, right there. So I suppose if I have to make a guess, and I were to make a guess, I would say this has a chance of finding support and breaking out early, but I'm inclined to think that and this is fine, it's just way too early. Be wherever. Well, I'll just get rid of it. Well, I don't want to get rid of it. Just move this over. There or something. Yeah, why not? And then I think this is possible though. I think it could drop down to 598. You see that little liquid gap too, that shelf. So basically testing just underneath 600. It's because it broke down. So again, it's one of those things where, like, if it were to be a bear trap, it's going to be pretty ugly. But it may just be like a flushing mechanism still. This is definitely here, guys. You see that motion? I don't think it's done. I know it's divergent. I know it looks kind of weak. And I do think this divergence might play out down to 598, as low as there. But it could even stop right now and jump up, you know. This just doesn't look finished. So on a small scale, it looks busted, like from here to here. It looks like, oh, it's done. Well, it's going to come low. But even there, the divergence doesn't go back particularly lower than like 598. But on the big picture, it hasn't done that yet. I think we're looking at we're looking at kind of a similar, I don't want to call it iteration in this case, but a similar model perhaps, because it's not exactly the same. But this idea of like this push and then this advancement beyond that, we're top. And you've got a similar push here and then a quick advancement beyond that top. That's a cross up, cross up. It looks like it's, to me, missing let me see here. Yeah, it's similar because this has a push up above the peak and then it goes up into a almost like a parabolic move afterwards. Like there's an exhaustion to it. It's trying. And then this did the same thing to a degree right here. So it pushes up above the peak and it kind of goes into this like micro exhaustion mode. So once it gets above there, yeah, it peaks above it one more time. How high did that go? Yeah, it's like a micro version of it. But I think what's missing, maybe it is done. Well, no, this move is not there on the smallest time frame. Like, it hasn't done it again. So you would have a backup to this creek, and then you'd have a backup to this creek. That just has the potential to go down really far, though. It's definitely like a flip-flop moment, isn't it? But perhaps it's not that severe. Like I said, the divergence is here, and that does look quite right as a potential. So this is high risk play for sure. Yeah, there's the other one. So zone there, zone here. That looks close to that top. Probably what they're aiming for. Easy enough. So always got in mind where you're looking backwards. Those are the zones that I would be looking at as possible stopping points. Not guarantees, but they're there. And then way low, but that's like different. That's over here. I think this one's that likely, actually, weirdly enough, even though it's the gap fill. Seems a lot less likely. These are the various markers going down. that I'd be looking at carefully. So the numbers there is 598, 594, and then 587. But again, if you ask me, I think that if this divergence completes to 598, I'm thinking it might be going right back up. It hasn't broken down yet. Interesting. Yeah. What happened to GME is they didn't announce anything substantial. There's a lot of volume right here. So just keep in mind, this is a huge amount of volume for a very small amount of space. If you actually look at the volume, this is an 8% drop, which is a big drop, but it already did most of this in extended hours. So the volume that we're seeing right now is not just selling. If this were all selling volume, this thing would be hitting the floor right now. You know what I mean? Remember back here, this was all, that volume was all in that day or two, not even. It was like within a day. And look how much was there, right? Versus now. So just keep in mind that like the volume is a good indicator for sure, but you also got to think about effort. Effort is really important in the market. So that entirety happened on that volume that you see down below. Arguably like the same, if not more. I have to go back and look, but high volume right now. Two massive volume bars that kind of eclipse this previous move, and it's only moved like 8%. Grand total will probably be more today, like a lot more, but that's a lot of trading volume right there. So large effort, but not the biggest result thus far. This is also, it looks like the 854. It's not exact, weirdly enough, but it's pretty close to the 854 on the retracement. Never say never. Like I said, I actually doubled down on my AMC $4. I don't really care if it comes down at this point. I just really feel like this is a very compelling chart. So I'm going to go with my instinct on it. Even if it's wrong, I'll take the consequence. Because there's something about this that's amiss. And I don't think it's going to avoid 390 and 350s. I think that's very likely. I just don't know why you wouldn't come back up above this top. And then there's something about the way this is building out and down that, again, it just feels like it's missing a piece. Now, I would probably exit if it hooked underneath 332. If it did not get back above 335, that's kind of the main, goal here. If that's the case, I would not want to trade it if it doesn't come back above there any further, because I think that's a big danger zone for breakdown. Could have a shallower hook here that then dumps the other way. It just doesn't go that high. The reason I was looking at the S&P 500 is I'm trying to see if there's actually good evidence that the whole market may rebound going into Monday. It's one of these like off chances, but it feels like something's missing. Yeah. Actually, this might be that simple. Hold on. Yeah. Honestly, this may not even yield very good results at all. It could end up being much the same and still push a little higher. Because looking at this big picture, I'm like, that's sort of the same thing we're talking about right now. I know it's hard to see stuff when my chart gets cluttered, but I'm looking at this, and that seems like the same pattern in terms of the count there. Really similar too on the price action. You kind of got this big first move, and then there's this kind of weaker. The first is the 1, right? And then you've got this kind of weaker 2, 3. Maybe even say 1, 2, 3 here. 1, 2, 3, because there's a 1, 2, and then a 3. The 3 might be part of the next 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. Regardless, it jumps over, comes up, and then it has some weakness for sure. Even here, it's like really struggling. This is divergent right there. See how there's like an obvious divergence on those tops. And it didn't matter. This is the 1 hour time frame. But see, like this pushed higher and the price of the RSI came down. And seeing something kind of similar in the build out right here with this continually trying to push higher, right? Now locally, really small, it's not divergent, but on the bigger picture, it certainly looks like it's getting that way. It's pretty extreme. But this right here is what I'm talking about. After it got over that top. Yeah, so we may yet be missing, kind of some downside, but I think that if the reaction happens up, it'd be like on a really extremely weak push, but it would be a push that sort of fulfills into the top here and sort of finishes the move. We'll just need, the question really to me is that I just don't know how low it needs to go before that could happen. I'm trying to make an estimation, but yeah. So there's no arguing that that's kind of bearish looking, but I don't know if that's going to stop it. I think you might just need to have like a retrace and then it'll pump. Did he actually say this? GameStop CEO says company is focusing on trading cards, zero hedge. Yeah, cards and collectibles, I think is what they said. But that's been the case for a long time. That's nothing new. I think it's like one of their biggest money makers, and it still sells very well. Yeah, that's probably just volatility and some other things. Your 4-hour moving average is up here at 27. Let's see where the daily is. Daily moving average is right at 26. So there's a good chance that it's going to go up to 26 again. But that sort of, to me anyways, seems like a given because of the creek. There's a pretty good chance it's going to try to make this climb at some point. I don't know when it's going to stop exactly, but this is a good bet, I think. Could be here, could be next week, who knows. I would suggest maybe Monday or Tuesday, usually the early part of the week. And it's, again, starting to kind of build out that way. So pretty good chance it's going to come back up and check that. Yeah, as it does. Especially because it extended really far quickly. Like, it didn't build on top of it. Sometimes you build on top of it, you might take a little more time away. And certainly, like, there's times we spend a lot of time away. Because again, they build up and then go away. It's very weird to kind of crash through something like that and not have an auto reaction of some kind. It's pretty atypical. Like, we did it back here, kind of just like crashed through it. But you get this nasty auto reaction. This is in reverse, right? Because you go so far away so fast. So if it spends a lot of time on it, you might spend a lot of time away from like a moving average or something. And a normal ticker, right? Not like a penny stock or something. Those moving averages may not get hit forever. You got to find the right ones. But this is a pretty typical daily 180 EMA. And it typically indicates like where the majority of trading is happening, consolidation wise. There's really nothing wrong with trading EMAs alone. The question I would ask is like, well, is this a reaction because of how far away it was already? You could make an argument that this still needs to go really low. I don't think it's going to likely do that. We've already kind of looked at the 50% markers. It's way extended. And so it has to also contend with the previous supports. So it's like you've got a lot of support in this region potentially. This is a good place to kind of check it out again, test liquidity. Maybe if you see a sign of weakness here, like that liquidity is weak, that's a big signal of like, uh-oh. Because then you become, like, so if this drops below, because then if you come back up, you've got this issue that like, well, this didn't hold. So they really would just be coming back up to do a backup and then probably continue. Versus like a higher low could be strong, could show some strength here, which is obviously good considering it already broke this creek, but then you'd have to still contend with this creek. So like AMC, like the idea of a 50-50 here isn't, that's why I was saying it's like, this is a pretty clean turnaround. It goes back up to the gap at 30.50. I mean, look at that. Right across that 26 area and up to the top. So I'm thinking that daily EMA and that 26 area, which I've said repeatedly because of where that creek was right there, that's really like the pivot on this move. It's not actually from the top through there. It's from this point. They consolidated at 31 down to 30.50. And that is probably the top anchor. So you've developed a range of sorts here from without even having it yet be in existence to some degree. And I know that this goes back in time and someone's going to say, well, that was already there. And I know it is. It should be. My point is that it's manufactured across the creek, and it's manufactured right now according to where that EMA is. So it should have like predictable retracements as a result, because typically your operators don't do this unless they're going to use that structure somehow. Or you can just say the bears and the bulls, I don't care. But that's there. So pretty decent chance, and that's also a level that we just didn't check. This was a support, and then we left it. We haven't even tested it in regular trading hours. Pretty decent chances of coming up to $25, $26. That being said, it does not mean that it has to go past it, and it doesn't mean that this couldn't go lower. All I'm saying is that that's a pretty high probability on a normal day-to-day kind of basis. I would look at that and be like, yeah, that's fine. That's probably a good trade. To think it comes back up to $25, $26. It's kind of in between. I keep saying 25, 26. Because like 25.60 is like that bottom, but then 26 is kind of more or less like right where that marker is. So it's in that range. And like AMC doesn't seem to have broken its creek at all, so not quite. At least not that one. There's another one that got destroyed here, which I'm not including on this chart right this second. And that's the one from way up top. This chart doesn't have it on there right this second, but I'll kind of spitball it right here. Just kind of quickly. There's this guy, and this goes really low. There was another one. It was like the parallels or something. I don't know. I have to look real quick. Yeah, I think it was the parallel structure from the bottom to the top. It's like right there. Yeah. Yep. So kind of a weird day. Not really a lot to say just yet. I'm gonna say guess, but my guess is that we might get some kind of recovery into tomorrow, or at least set up for recovery going into Monday. And I don't think we're gonna see it just kind of keep dropping hard. We're probably gonna see some kind of a formation down here. It may last through tomorrow. It may react tomorrow. It doesn't really matter to me. But you have a decent chance there's going to be a reaction at some point. Again, maybe by Monday, Tuesday, back up here. It's probable. It is. We'll have to kind of maybe get temperature on the market near the end of day going into tomorrow. So I'm not going to hold my breath for anything today. I'll keep an eye on the market. And if something crazy happens, I might come back. But for now, I think I'm done with a stream. I'm not going to stream anymore right this second. And I think we've got a pretty good idea of what may happen here if certain things turn around. It could be a very rapid fire turnaround. There's a lot of information that's not on this chart. This was like a second attempt to do a cleanup on it. I'm not overly concerned about that right now. I see it as just another kind of way of looking at the same information. And I don't worry that it's not exactly like every other chart I have or whatever. But the overall picture here isn't quite bleak yet. I think there's some potential for kind of another major move up before any more downside. And I'm actually a little bit optimistic going into Monday. But I'll put the last caveat on it, which is depending on what happens today and tomorrow, we'll see how it sets up. I do still think that it's going to be weak. So I think that the market on the whole, if it goes up, and it may, to retest all-time highs, it would do so on weakness. So it would not be a very strong push at this point. And I think for AMC and GME, it's similar. You might get some pretty big moves, but they don't necessarily go up on serious strength, especially AMC. I think there's a likelihood that that's really for that on-balance pump, which is currently floating. I mean, it's way high. If you look at where it was on May 16th, I mean, that's kind of crazy. We're in the same price-wise, that we were then. And maybe that's because they want to get that buy-in again. I don't know. But if you look at where we were on the 16th back here, that's still looking really bearish, doesn't it? It's going to be one of those things that it's like kind of goes against the grain if I'm right. Yeah. Looks like it's just going to keep dropping. I wonder if it just needs to get to that retracement because it just hasn't quite gotten there. It's not that far off. So it's like doing this after the fact, like you didn't come back up. There was no check there. So instead it like hits and then it goes way back up here instead. That seems right. Because it went down first. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, look at where we are on the on balance right now. It's sitting at like 40.3. And if you look at where we were back here, May 16th. It was like not extremely off, but that's still like highly vertical versus being quite literally like down here. So that on balance is still running divergent from the price action at the moment. It's kind of interesting. Do I think that we get a good push this afternoon? Well, buying and selling contracts doesn't really move the price. You need to have shares that are exercised. So I don't think that's going to make a big impact. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously market maker pressures and junk like that going into a Friday. I don't really care to get into that too much. What I would just look for is like basics turnaround stuff. Like this right now is trying to have a turnaround because it just jumped this guy. You see that? This is really straightforward. If you're trading this and you're trying to catch a knife, you should look at where it opened, or at least the place that it got to at 24.30. You should look at this bottom. Consider that it had the low there of 22.82 in the first candle of the day on the 30-minute. That's the kind of the support region right here. So there's a clear kind of a range setup if you're paying attention at the moment that's got a decently clean 50-50 range. And I don't think it's that good, but it's okay. Maybe it's more like this top right here. It's roughly right there. So, if you can jump a creek here and then get out today, yeah, I mean, I think you can be out of there. So you're probably looking at it coming back above 23.60. Everything else is going to be a no-go. If it's a wick here, you could expect it to go back down and test. Until this kind of makes the jump over and finds support, then SOS is here. I don't think you're going to see it go. So I would just be looking at this very simply on GME and kind of watching those go and see where it builds out. It can happen pretty fast, but the picture right now is not great. It seems like it was trying to get over there, but it's having some trouble. It's like trying to close beneath it. It needs to hold above it. But this will make sense to me as well. Yeah, it's trying. But this is the same kind of thing that can instigate like a secondary sell-off. All that's happened right now is the first low reacted and then it came back down lower, which doesn't really seem very good. Again, maybe indicates that you're trying to get down a little bit lower here. That trend is not horrible compared to where we are. So even if it dropped and went there, it's not like extremely low. But then you just want to see like that change of character, right? At some point where it doesn't go low again. Instead it comes up and now makes a new high. And this clearly didn't. So it didn't push above that top. It went just up underneath it. So it's struggling. And this is an evolving thing. You just kind of watch it, see how it goes. So maybe the cross is a little bit lower. Who knows? Once it makes the higher high here, it pushes above 23. I think you're going to have a good chance that's where you would maybe start considering a development of upside potential. Even better would be like this guy, because this was the top of that little range, 23.26. That would be pretty strong. We're going to get into minutia here, but that's where you'd want to see that walkout and start indicating like, yeah, you're making higher highs, so on and so forth. But that's a good spot right there, like right at 23.04, 23.05. If it makes that push and then it comes down and makes a higher low, I think that's a good potential buy-in, especially if it's on top of this creek. Something like that happens. It should be good to go. And then it'll start like really pushing out. And I don't know when that happens, but Tesla has had a big recovery. Over time, yeah, it's done really well considering. And then, yeah, here, this looks okay. It's a little bit, a little bit of a weak spot. I mean, this is the widening here, so I had a lot of different ideas about how Tesla might move. If it jumps here, it's possible it goes pretty far because that's a really major widening. But otherwise, this is kind of the ceiling, right? You can see why I would say that. Like this is the widening right here. It's hitting it at the moment. So this would be a good place to distribute. I'm just saying. Weirdly though, there's this kind of other widening that happened, and you can see it's trying to hold that as a support. So you can see that, I'm going to move my little bars out of the way here. You can see that it's actually trying to hold that as a support, and then that orange line I think is a longer term. I don't even know why I have that on the chart, actually. There's always a reason for it, but I don't know what it is right this second. I have no idea why that's there right there. I don't know. Anyways, the 1 hour is right there as well. So this is just one of those zones of like high volatility. Like you're going to have, meaning like a higher probability of a breakdown. And then there's also a decent chance it breaks out, but you've got to get that move above, and it hasn't done that. So that wick to 333 looks kind of like just it's wicking up to hit that top. If it came above the top here and found support, I think you're pretty bullish. You could make a very strong case that goes pretty darn far. I'm not really sure where this comes from either. Then you'd be looking at near, back to near all-time highs. And again, why not? If the market goes and it ends up pushing back to near all-time highs, some of these tickers are probably going to make some pretty decent gains. This is the middle right here at 342. So that would be a liquidity check. That would make sense. That being said, if it has some kind of like a head fake here, this is also the place I would do a distribution. It'd be really easy to kind of walk it backwards and be done. Because then it's out of that trend and this one. And it's really just reacting backwards until wherever it finds support again. I'm not saying it has to come this low, but you could go all the way down to like 280s. Probably 300 is more likely. Just looking at this, eyeballing it, this level. So this is kind of low. Yeah, it's a bit low. But sure, yeah, that makes sense. Apple hit 198 finally. So it took a long time to get there. It could still come lower down to like 194. We'll watch and see. This is sort of irrelevant. This has to do with iteration markup. I would even say that this could happen here lower and come down a little slower. It failed to hold above. I mean, that was really the current nail in the coffin for Apple. It just did not hold above here. And as a result, you see this drop. But from there on, it's got a lot of possibility. The iteration, as it stands, hasn't made a lower low yet. This could be a repeat on that same model that we see here. If it builds out with some strength and it does it again, you could be over the top. So this isn't really maybe the best example, but I had this idea of like, well, even if it dropped low, and I'll just stick it down here, you can have it come back over the top. Probably should have just moved it down. And it might take a while. The sideways action here is certainly a possibility. And if it continues to kind of shrink and go down into these like chop ups, at some point, if that iteration drops down, it's going to be really ugly. It's going to be like a flush, because it'll flush like small, then big, then big, then big. until it goes probably really, really low. So yeah, so Apple looking a little shaky. It'd be interesting if the market like spins around today. That's distribution. Yeah, I mean, this is like a distributive motion. There's a small possibility that you run into a, yeah, I mean, it's there. It's a possibility. There's a possibility you run into what's called a UTAD here. So this pattern has some markings that are familiar to me. Usually if it does that, it doesn't come up past this point again. So in a UTAD, this diamond doesn't really respond with strength. It just kind of brings itself back out with a maybe an up thrust. So I wouldn't put this much past like 45 cents. If it makes support over 45 cents, you might be in good shape. But and then where would it go before it does that? Yeah, there's a lot of weakness in it. It's like it's a bit narrowing right now, which is fine. I don't really care about that. A little bit of a narrowing going on. I think. Yeah, that's the drop. That's the start of a potential slingshot. This looks way off on this time frame. Yeah, I think this is it. There's a couple of spots that I'm not really sure about, but between now and like tomorrow, it may pop to like 44 cents. But I wouldn't put it any further than that. It's a decent move. My main concern would be some kind of a really deep dive first, like, and then just kind of having like a crappy average. Because it could drop here and be fairly comfortable doing it and then reverse. So I know that 45 cent area is the likely candidate. Looking at that middle, yeah, this could go pretty low to like 32. Because I'm looking at this ledge, like that's the halfway point. I don't know, I can't really tell what's going on right here. It looks like it's going to try to, it's like consolidating really hardcore. So this would be reasonable to me. And then that's a UTAD. And then it just kind of like consolidates a little bit more than normal, and then it continues down. Back down to the floor. That's my estimation on this. And then it's going to go down to this marker over time. Like that. It won't be a straight line. There'll be a lot of other stuff that happens, but that makes sense. It hits that trend. Yeah, there we go. Actually, it is coming together quite nicely. So it may not be that fast because I think it's a bit complicated. But that's like a wave right there. So it may not get up here until maybe Friday or Monday. More like that. I might trade this if it goes below here. I would consider it. It should be like right around, yeah, this like liquid center right here on the middle. I think that's a good, potentially really good trade. 40%. I don't think it goes any higher than that. I think it really more than likely dies off. It's just already set up kind of weak right here, in my opinion. And then the rest of this is just straightforward, like to the bottom kind of stuff. You see that triangulation building out. Let's see if there's an intersection there. Ah, there is. Surprising nobody. So the resulting action of this, it's like a, and I don't know, they could even form like a weakness here and go like slightly below before going up. That's possible. Could go pretty far down actually, because there's no real telling what the goal might be with that drop ultimately. I'm just looking at this like the widening that's appearing locally, but you also could consider that in reverse, there's some pretty important key lines like through here. So you're going to have possibility that it drops to one of these. It's a bit odd. Maybe this one. This is probably more reasonable. So you might see a lower low there than beneath that trend, but that actually worked really well. So pretty clean. So like I said, it's a pretty good move. I wouldn't. It looks like they're going back to this jump zone, which is where you're consolidating. That's why I think it's a weakness, because they're using this anchor right here where it built off, and they see that they're pushing through, distributing, pushing through, and then chopping up. This would be a great place to like hit it and try again. If it goes, which I think is unlikely, but if it goes, this would end up being like a 50-50 move up. And you could go as high as like 62 cents. But that's as far, again, about as far as I would take it. So it's being built on a very solid basis, in my opinion. But I'm looking at this like, yeah, that reaction right here is more likely. And I don't see that as a very, I don't know, very strong candidate for a breakout right now. Yeah, it could go pretty far down. Maybe even 30 cent. So everything like 33 and below is a good buy. I mean, if it goes up earlier, it goes up earlier. But you don't have to take this trade. There's other ways to make money in the market. But yeah, I mean, this could be a great trade if you're interested in it. I'm making that marker here because I think that's a probable buy zone. I'm going to raise it up just a bit. That makes sense from back here as well. I don't know. I read this as a distributive action right here. So I think it's going to maybe try to drop real quick and then go up hard. So if you didn't care about a drop, you could buy in some and then wait and see. No, not sure there's any other real evidence that it needs to drop, but I just think it's going to happen. So I'm going to stick with it. If it doesn't, then it's still probable it goes to the same spot. You would have some kind of like a little dip and then you'd rip up. But I think this may go like much weaker. It'd be like instead of going up to 45 to 47, it probably only goes up to like 42. And it craps out pretty low instead. You get more bang for your buck if you go down lower. Much better move. So, all right, I got to go. I got to eat lunch, move on with my day. I may not be back today. We'll see what happens way this afternoon, but I doubt that I'll come back and do another stream. I've got a lot of other stuff. I'm working on like a book cover for a client, so I need to work on that today. Make some serious progress on it. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I hope you have a great day. Talk to you later.